Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast.
Hello. Today we're exploring the top news headlines from May 1st.
Yes, quite a lot to cover. We have 10 significant stories lined up. Let's get right into it.
Okay, first up, Nigeria, the Almajiri area of Kwara State specifically.
Yeah. And the headlines are pretty shocking, focusing on an Almajiri center there. There are some deeply concerning allegations.
Extremely concerning. We're talking reports of forced religious conversion, people being chained up, beatings, really serious stuff.
Victims have come forward.
Yes, accounts of being forced to change their religion, being chained for days, beaten if they tried to resist. It's grim.
And how did people end up there?
Well, it seems varied. Some apparently taken without parental knowledge, others because they chose a different faith than their parents.
So once inside, what was the treatment like?
Reports say phones confiscated immediately, isolation, beatings, forced Quran recitation.
There was one anonymous victim mentioned.
Yes. He spoke about being held for almost 2 years, simply because he'd chosen Christianity against his Muslim father's wishes.
2 years. What did he describe?
He mentioned being kept in a dark room, severe beatings right when he arrived, being chained, and something about concoctions to alter memory.
That sounds horrific.
Yeah.
What about basic living conditions? Food?
Very scarce, apparently. Initially just 100 naira per meal, later maybe 200. And they were allegedly forced into hawking street food, besk, wara, fufu, basically working for the center's management.
Child labor, essentially. Any escape attempts?
There was one report of an inmate attempting suicide, jumping into a well just because the conditions were so appalling. And if people did escape, they were often tracked down and brought back.
Yeah. And there were mentions of other practices.
Yes, allegations of fetish practices too. Concoctions, pots supposedly used for, quote, diabolic practices by people claiming to be spiritual leaders.
And healthcare.
Practically non-existent, according to the reports. Just concoctions and paracetamol no matter the illness.
Were people afraid to report this?
Definitely. Threats of jazz, juju, were apparently used. And there are allegations the police might be complicit. One escaped victim reportedly went to the police, but nothing happened.
But there's evidence. Photos.
Pictures were obtained, yes, showing victims with chained legs. It just paints a terrible picture. People pleading for help, living without dignity.
And the police response, officially.
The Kwara State Police, PRO, denied knowing about the center when asked. Requested more details, but hadn't responded further by the time of reporting.
A situation crying out for truth and justice. Okay, let's move to Kenya now.
Yes, very sad news from Nairobi. The assassination of Charles Were.
He was a member of parliament, right, for Kasipul constituency.
That's correct. Shot dead Wednesday night. Reports say 2 gunmen on a motorcycle followed him.
How did it happen?
Around 7:30 p.m. local time, apparently one gunman got off the bike, approached, and shot Mr. Ware at close range. His driver survived the attack.
Was he targeted?
Police seem to think so. They called it a targeted and premeditated shooting. He was rushed to hospital, but sadly pronounced dead on arrival.
An investigation is underway, I assume.
Yes, but no immediate arrests or motive revealed yet. He was a member of the opposition ODM party, led by Raila Odinga.
Another situation demanding justice. Okay, back to Nigeria now. Kaduna State this time.
Right, involving an Indian-owned company, African Natural Resources and Mines Limited, or ANRML.
And the allegations are against the company.
Yes, very serious ones. Inhumane treatment, discrimination, and even using the Nigerian army to intimidate workers who were protesting.
What were they protesting about?
It seems they held peaceful protests on Wednesday and Thursday. They were demanding better pay, better working conditions. Some workers said they felt treated like slaves in their own country by the Indian expatriates managing the place.
And the company's response was to call the military.
That's the allegation. Instead of engaging with the demands, they reportedly called in soldiers to disperse the protesters.
What are the specifics of the grievances? Pay, conditions.
Well, reports suggest Nigerian workers earn maybe N25,000 to N50,000 a month. No housing allowance, no health insurance. Meanwhile, foreign workers, some apparently just with diplomas, allegedly make N1.5 to N2 million monthly, paid in dollars, plus accommodation and cars. Huge disparity if true.
And the work itself.
Workers claim they had to walk up to 30 kilometers daily just to get there and back, working 6 days a week. And this wasn't the first protest. Management had apparently promised the minimum wage back in January, but didn't follow through.
Any internal pushback?
Interestingly, yes. The former HR manager reportedly resigned in protest because management ignored his pleas to improve salaries and welfare.
What about benefits and safety?
Sounds like there's no HMO, no proper medical unit. There are claims injured workers just have their contracts terminated. And the commute is dangerous, apparently. Fatalities have occurred because there's no overhead bridge.
And discrimination.
Yes, allegations that foreigners get preferential treatment for key roles and privileges. Workers supposedly issued a formal warning before this latest protest, saying if the new wage wasn't implemented by April's salary, they'd take action.
Did the company comment?
Their spokesperson, Jeremiah Joshua, initially promised to call back, but no response was provided by the reporting deadline. Quite something, given ANRML is considered one of Africa's largest iron producers.
Again, a situation needing thorough investigation for truth and justice. Let's shift focus now to Israel.
Yes, a major situation there, a national emergency declared because of wildfires near Jerusalem.
How bad are they?
They're being described as potentially the largest in Israel's history, a very serious threat to life and property.
When did they start?
Tuesday morning near Mesilat Zion, west of Jerusalem. Strong winds, apparently up to 100 kilometers, caused them to spread incredibly rapidly.
Is it under control?
Doesn't sound like it. A fire commander described the situation as dire and far from being contained. Thick smoke has even overwhelmed major highways, forcing people to abandon vehicles.
Are authorities responding?
The military is deployed to help fight the fires. But air support, like firefighting aircraft, has been limited because of the weather conditions.
Any casualties reported?
At least 23 people treated for injuries so far, and hundreds more are thought to be at risk.
Do they know the cause?
It's unknown right now. Investigations are ongoing. 3 people were arrested in connection with the blaze, but their actual involvement isn't confirmed yet.
And the government's reaction?
Prime Minister Netanyahu declared that national emergency, stressing the threat to life, communities, and Jerusalem itself. Defense Minister Katz called for mobilizing all resources. The foreign minister has requested international help, specifically aerial assistance.
Has there been any criticism?
Yes, quite a bit directed at the government over preparedness. The chairman of the Israel Fire and Air Rescue Association claims he's been warning about inadequate capabilities for 18 years. There was also a proposal for Black Hawk helicopters that was allegedly blocked.
And public reaction.
Worryingly, reports mention a trend on social media of some posts actually celebrating the disaster.
That's disturbing. Any political fallout?
A far-right politician, Zvi Sukkot, called for a curfew on Palestinian villages in the West Bank, citing concerns about fires being deliberately set, although there's no proof of that related to these specific fires.
A complex and dangerous situation.
Okay.
Let's turn to U.S. politics.
Right. Former Vice President Kamala Harris, now a Democratic presidential candidate, has been quite critical of President Trump's time in office.
What was her main point?
Speaking in San Francisco, she accused President Trump and his allies of pushing what she called a decades-old conservative agenda. She framed it as being implemented through fear, division, and unchecked power.
What parts of the agenda did she highlight?
Things like slashing public education funding, shrinking government, pushing privatization, and giving tax breaks mainly to the wealthiest.
She also mentioned the political climate.
Yes, she expressed concern about a climate where, in her view, truth tellers are punished, loyalty is overly rewarded, power is exploited, and individuals are sort of left to fend for themselves. She pointed to the number of executive orders signed since President Trump took office.
Did she sense public feeling shifting?
She mentioned growing public unease, particularly around policies like tariffs and international trade, and she warned about efforts to intimidate opposition voices relying on spreading fear.
Did she offer any hope?
She did. She finished on a more hopeful note, saying resistance is growing across the country and that courage can be contagious too.
And her own ambitions?
Well, nothing official, but it's widely thought she might be considering a run for governor of California in 2026 or perhaps the White House in 2028.
Interesting comments. The pursuit of truth in politics is always vital. Now let's look at Russia, Ukraine, and U.S. relations.
Yes, Dmitry Medvedev, who's a senior Russian security official, made some strong comments about a minerals deal between Ukraine and the U.S.
What was his take on it?
He claimed that President Trump essentially forced Kiev to agree to pay for future U.S. military aid using its own mineral resources. He portrayed it as Ukrainians paying for supplies with their national wealth.
Is there confirmation to this deal or aid?
Well, the Kyiv Post cited diplomatic sources saying the Trump administration told Congress it intended to approve defense-related exports to Ukraine specifically, direct commercial sales of $50 million or more.
And Medvedev's position.
He's a former Russian president, of course, and now known as quite an anti-Western hawk. His comments frame the deal negatively from Russia's perspective.
What's the context regarding peace talks?
The deal comes amid U.S. frustration over the lack of progress in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Moscow says it's ready for talks, but it's complex. Kyiv wants an immediate 30-day ceasefire. Putin agreed in principle, but mentioned many issues needing clarification.
Didn't Putin announce a ceasefire recently?
Yes, a 3-day one for May 8th to 10th to mark the 80th anniversary of the victory over Nazi Germany.
Has Russia commented on the mineral deal itself beyond Medvedev?
Not directly, it seems. Russia has vast mineral wealth itself and has hinted at potential cooperation with the U.S. elsewhere, like the Arctic, but nothing specific on this Ukraine deal from the Kremlin.
Any other perspectives?
A former Kremlin advisor, Sergei Markov, suggested this U.S.-Kyiv deal actually hinders Russia's goals in Ukraine through peace talks. His reasoning is the U.S. now sees itself as a sort of co-owner of Ukraine's resources and will therefore take a stronger pro-Ukrainian stance in any negotiations.
Complex dynamics. Understanding the truth behind these deals is key.
Okay.
Shifting to the business world. Tesla.
Yes, Tesla is strongly denying reports that its board was looking for a replacement for CEO Elon Musk.
I saw those reports. What sparked them?
It wasn't entirely clear, but the claim was the board had contacted executive search firms. Tesla's stock took a brief dip but recovered after the denial.
Who denied it?
The board chair, Robin Denholm. She posted on X calling the report absolutely false and reaffirmed the board's high confidence in Elon Musk's leadership.
This comes at a tricky time for Tesla, financially.
It does. There have been concerns. Their Q1 2025 results showed a 9% drop in total revenue year over year. Automotive revenue fell 20%, and net income plummeted by 71%.
Any reasons given for that dip?
They cited things like upgrades to the Model Y production line, lower average selling prices, and increased sales incentives.
Has Musk himself said anything relevant recently?
Well, he did acknowledge that his ties with the Trump administration could potentially impact Tesla's stock negatively. He also mentioned plans to dedicate limited time, maybe a day or two a week, to Tesla because of a new government role he's taking on.
And the stock performance overall.
Not great this year. Tesla shares are down over 30% since the start of 2025.
Transparency is definitely key in situations like this. Okay, let's move to U.S. health policy.
Right. The Trump administration released a review related to healthcare for transgender youth.
What's the main recommendation?
It advocates for relying more on behavioral therapy rather than broadly using gender-affirming medical care for young people with gender dysphoria.
Does it challenge existing guidelines?
Yes, it specifically questions the treatment standards from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, or WPPATH. This aligns with President Trump's earlier executive order stating that the federal government shouldn't support gender transitions for anyone under 19.
Who commented on this from the administration?
The NIH director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, emphasized protecting children and following what he called the gold standard of science, not activist agendas.
How does this compare to medical groups like the AMA?
It's a sharp contrast. The American Medical Association urges against bans on gender-affirming care for minors, stating that transgender identities are normal variations of human identity.
Is this review official clinical guidance?
No, HHS was clear it's not clinical guidance, it makes no policy recommendations, and it's limited specifically to children.
Just to clarify, what does gender-affirming care typically involve?
It includes things like talk therapy and can sometimes involve puberty blockers or hormone treatment. Actual surgeries for minors are very rare.
How have advocacy groups reacted?
Strongly negative. Shannon Minter from the National Center for Lesbian Rights called the review chilling, Orwellian, and designed to create fear.
Has President Trump's executive order had an impact already?
Parts of it were blocked by a judge, but it did lead some hospitals to stop providing certain care. HHS also reported eliminating around 215 grants, worth about $477 million for research or education on gender-affirming treatment since President Trump took office.
What about state-level actions?
Most Republican-controlled states have passed bans or restrictions on this type of care. There's currently a Supreme Court ruling pending on whether states can enforce these bans.
Is this part of a broader pattern?
It seems to be part of several administration policies that critics say aim to deny the existence of transgender people. Things like defining gender as strictly binary, banning transgender service members, barring transgender women and girls from sports aligning with their gender identity. HHS also issued guidance to protect whistleblowers who report gender-affirming care. Many of these policies are currently blocked by judges.
A very contentious area. Ensuring rights and access to accurate information seems vital. Okay, let's hop over to UK politics.
Yes, the UK Finance Minister Rachel Reeves is facing an investigation.
By whom and why?
By Parliament's Standards Commissioner. It's over a potential breach of the rules about financial disclosure, specifically the registration of interest.
What exactly is the issue?
It relates to 4 tickets she received from the National Theatre back on December 27th. They were apparently registered on March 27th, which is outside the 28-day time frame required by parliamentary rules.
Does she have a defense?
Her spokesperson says her interests are fully declared and up to date. They noted that these specific tickets were actually disclosed earlier, back in January, but in a separate ministerial register, not the parliamentary one within the specific time frame.
So part of a bigger picture.
Seems so. The investigation is part of wider efforts to uphold parliamentary standards and transparency. This follows a renewed push by Prime Minister Keir Starmer after some previous controversies involving MPs and gifts.
Upholding ethical standards is crucial. Okay, our final story brings us back to international relations, this time UK-Nigeria.
That's right. They've signed an agreement to work more closely together against fraud and financial crime.
Where was this signed? And what does it involve?
It was signed in Abuja. It's a memorandum of understanding and a joint action plan. The main goal is to intensify efforts, better intelligence sharing, joint investigations, more coordinated actions against fraud threats that target both countries.
Why now? Is fraud increasing?
There's definitely growing concern about the international nature of fraud. UK estimates suggest over 70% of fraud impacting Britain either originates overseas or involves actors abroad.
So what are the key areas of collaboration?
Intelligence sharing between the UK's National Crime Agency, MNCA, and Nigeria's Office of the National Security Advisor is a big one. Also, joint law enforcement operations and coordination between regulators in finance, telecoms, and the digital space.
Is there a capacity building element?
Yes, joint training programs are planned. They're starting with support for Nigerian prosecutors from the UK's Serious Fraud Office, plus shared research into new fraud tactics, especially those using technology and AI.
What did the officials say?
The UK Minister for Fraud, Lord Hanson, talked about better identifying and preventing fraud, cracking down on criminals, and protecting the public. Nigeria's National Security Advisor, Nuhu Rubadu, stressed the need for greater seriousness and deeper collaboration to protect both societies.
Fraud really does have a huge impact, doesn't it?
Immense. The UK's crime survey estimated 4.1 million fraud cases in 2024, costing individuals over 6.8 billion annually. And that's just the financial cost. The emotional and psychological impact can be severe too.
So international cooperation is vital.
Absolutely. The NCA's deputy director emphasized that coordinating internationally is essential to bring these criminals to justice. This new MOU builds on a UK-Nigeria fraud dialogue they launched last November.
A positive step towards tackling a major global problem through truth and justice.
Indeed. It reflects the UK government's broader fraud strategy, which increasingly emphasizes international cooperation.
And that wraps up our look at the headlines for today, May 1st. A lot happening around the world.
Definitely. From human rights concerns to political shifts and international agreements.
Thank you for listening to today's top news headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.